Very well. The Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade will now come to order. The Chair recognizes himself for 5 minutes for the purpose of an opening statement, and good morning, and welcome to our witnesses. Welcome to our hearing on advanced robotics, technology that has made its way into the United States economy in a variety of sectors. This is the latest installment in our Disruptor series covering technologies that are redefining our lives and improving our economic condition. It is 2016, and so many people my age will, of course, remember the cartoon The Jetsons and coming home to Rosie the Robot, who always had George Jetson's stuff all aligned for him. And many of us ask ourselves, where's Rosie the Robot today? Well, maybe today we're going to learn how, if we're not perhaps a little bit closer. But we are living in a world where you can actually use your iPhone to ask Siri, Alexa, or Cortana any question and get a real-time, accurate, and perhaps a whimsical response. Already, advanced robotics are integrated into our economy with increasingly complex application, from manufacturing floors to surgical suites to fashion shows, as we learned on the lead on Drudge this morning. Smart prosthetics are changing the lives of amputees and the elderly. Even some technologies that we have explored in previous Disruptor Series hearings leverage advanced robotic technology, including the Internet of Things and drones. I look forward to hearing from our panel of witnesses about the real-world advanced robotics applications that students, academics, and industry professionals are all working toward. Each of our witnesses today can give us a different view on the emerging trends and challenges presented by advanced robotics and technology. The future workforce trends are particularly interesting. If it is true that more jobs will include some automation component in the coming decades, understanding how are students and professionals of all ages able to acquire the skills necessary to adapt to this changing landscape is important to us as policymakers. As with any new technology, it is critical to examine the benefits of the technology and weigh important consumer protection questions. Throughout our history, Americans have adopted and adjusted to economic shifts presented by new technology. In our examination of these issues, it will be important to understand how consumers and businesses will be using the technologies and how they will be protected while preserving the flexibility and ingenuity of innovators that are driving this market forward. Again, I want to thank our witnesses for taking the time to inform us about the exciting applications and the future potential benefits of advanced robotics. Certainly look forward to a thoughtful and engaged discussion, and I would like to yield the rest of the time to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, Vice Chairman of the full committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do want to welcome our witnesses. I had the opportunity to meet Mr. Kamen a few months ago and talk with him about what he is doing in the field of robotics and the importance of that specifically to my district in Tennessee. Brentwood Academy, which is in my district, the Iron Eagles are the international champions. They're putting an emphasis on robotics, and not only is it BA, but Vanderbilt University is developing some robotic devices for utilization of children with autism. We are seeing other schools in the area begin to integrate robotics and the utilization of robotics, the development of this technology into core curriculums in science and math, the STEM activities. It is a wonderfully exciting avenue for our students. I think it's so appropriate that we have this hearing, that we look at this as a part of the Disruptor series and not be fearful of it, but engage what it is going to bring to productivity in the manufacturing marketplace, to our communities, to everyday tasks. I've talked with a couple of my fast food franchise owners about the utilization of robotics in mechanization in the fast food industry. Fascinating, the opportunities that it opens. It does mean that we have to put an emphasis on the education so that we have a workforce that is excited about working in this area. And Mr. Chairman, I will yield the time back to you or to whomever would like it.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back, and the chair recognizes the subcommittee ranking member, Ms. Schakowsky, for 5 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we are continuing our Disruptor series with a hearing on advanced robotics. Robots are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and at the same time, robot technology is becoming cheap enough that people can actually bring bring robots into our homes, whether we're talking toys, that's been for a long time, but vacuum cleaners or other consumer products. The potential for robotics is really great, and I'm interested in how we can help develop that potential. In June, I met with 4 girls from Mount Prospect, Illinois, who were part of a robotics team through Girl Scouts. They were in D.C. for the Global Innovation Challenge, sponsored by the U.S. Patent Office. If we want to continue the advanced technology, then we certainly need to provide young girls and boys opportunities in science and technology. First Robotics has been a leader in encouraging students to pursue robotics, and I look forward to hearing more about that organization's work and from Mr. Kamen. Some of the most innovative work in robotics comes out of our major research universities. For instance, Northwestern, which is in my hometown of Evanston, Illinois, has been collaborating with the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago to research bio-inspired robotics. They look at how fish swim and how the human hand moves and how animals use their whiskers, and then use it to build robotics that can really improve the lives of persons with disabilities. This research has tremendous promise, particularly for improving health care. Robotics also has significant implications for federal policy. We need to invest in research and education that continues the technological progress that we see. And as Mr. Bernstein and Dr. Koda noted in their written testimony, robotics has changed the nature of American manufacturing. We need to make sure that today's workers are prepared for this transition and that we are training today's workers for tomorrow's manufacturing jobs, or really today's manufacturing jobs. As robotics become more commonplace in daily life, we have to consider the implication for consumer safety and privacy. Robots often collect and respond to information in their surroundings. How is that information used and how is it stored? Who has access to that information? What does the consumer need to know, and what does the consumer when the consumer provides and when does the consumer provide consent? These are questions that designers and consumer watchdogs must grapple with. And the answer may not be the same for all technologies. Robotics also raises questions of ethics and responsibility. Let's say an accident occurs. This is a very real concern when we're talking about self-driving cars, for example. When does the fault rest with the manufacturer? When does it reside with the user? Dr. Jones mentions several of these issues in her written testimony, and I look forward to hearing more from her on ways our government can respond to this technological innovation. Dr. Jones defines robots as technologies that sense, think, and act. Congress is not robotic, but I hope we will do the same thing in our subcommittee, take the information, process that information, and then take action based on what we've learned. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and to working with my colleagues to ensure that federal policy keeps pace with technological change. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll yield to my colleague, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank my colleague, Ms. Schakowsky. I want to thank the chairman for calling this hearing and for continuing the series. Really interested in that prospect of, and the testimony from our experts today. Clearly, the opportunities for innovation around advanced robotics are almost limitless. And so I think from my perspective anyway, trying to understand how Congress can continue to support that innovation and support that progress is critical. It does potentially bring up some interesting ethical questions and profound questions about the economic impact and questions about data and privacy and potentially jobs in the economy as well. And Dr. Jones, you touched on that a bit in your testimony, written testimony. So I'd love to start to explore just the broad base of those concepts and any guidance that you all might be willing to lend to us as innovations in this field continue to unfold at a pace that actually far exceeds, I think, that of experts even a couple of months or years ago. We're making tremendous progress in fields of advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, and others. And what does that really mean, given the fact that we're moving more quickly than people had even expected? So with that, I yield back, and I thank the chairman.
Chair thanks the gentleman. Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Upton. 5 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today, our Disruptor series turns to advanced robotics for what I know will be an interesting and thoughtful discussion. Particularly excited to welcome my good friend Dean Kamen back to the committee. He has appeared a good number of times, adding his valuable insight to our 21st Century Cures effort. And for those who don't know, he's often referred to as the Dean of Invention, and has been at the forefront of disruptive technologies his entire career. His decades of leadership and imagination have undoubtedly changed the face of advanced robotics, from the invention of the Segway and iBot electric chair to the drug infusion pump and so many others. His inventions and entrepreneurial spirit have led to the growth of the FIRST competition. FIRST, of course, stands for Inspiration and Recognition of Science and Technology. His passion for innovation inspires kids from kindergarten to high school and encourages them to get involved in engineering and other STEM fields. The program has grown from 20 teams to over 45,000 teams nationwide since it was founded in '89. I've got a great relationship with FIRST Robotics, very proud supporter. My home state of Michigan is becoming Robot Central, with by far the highest number of FIRST teams per capita in the country. To describe what this competition is like, FIRST teams receive a box with 120 pounds of components. They've got 6 weeks to design and build a functioning robot, and what they come up with in those 6 weeks is nothing short of amazing. I've been to a number of competitions across the state, always impressed with what the kids are coming up with. It's inspiring. I want to stay there all day. From the St. Joe Average Joes, this team, to the 2767 Striker Force team in Kalamazoo. Innovative STEM programs like FIRST allows for kids in our communities to dream big and aspire to become inventors, engineers, small business owners, community leaders. It's also refreshing to see kids excited by science. And I would note that Dean was treated like he was Bruce Springsteen, walking into St. Joe High School, a rock star for sure. I'm also proud to co-sponsor bipartisan legislation with my colleague Debbie Dingell that would use the sale of commemorative coins for astronaut Krista McAuliffe, who was, of course, tragically lost in the Challenger disaster, to raise money for FIRST around the country. And I look forward to hearing even more from Dean and all of our witnesses about their recent efforts, whether it be FIRST, how the industry and government have gotten involved with the program. I also note that the Robotics Industries Association is headquartered in Ann Arbor. Go Blue. Dr. Koda, among his many projects, is a professor at the University of Michigan. Understanding how industry approaches advances in robotic technology, whether in capital investments or new partnership opportunities, is so critical to understanding how we move disruptive inventions from the lab into commerce to create jobs and the economic growth here at home and a better quality of life for all. Thank Chairman Burgess for continuing this series. I yield the balance of my time to my friend from Mississippi, Dr. Harper.
Thanks for the high degree. So just no doctor. Well, doctor of jurisprudence. Does that count?
It does.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for calling this hearing today. And I'm excited to continue this subcommittee's work on the Disruptor series and looking forward to our discussion on advanced robotics. In my district, Mississippi State University is actively conducting research and making advances through a number of projects in the robotics arena, including a National Science Foundation award to develop the TheraBot, a therapeutic robot support system in the form of a beagle dog that is responsive to touch through multiple sensors. The TheraBot will be used for therapy sessions with the clinician as well as for home therapy exercises, especially for individuals with post-traumatic stress disorder. Another project that's been funded in the past by Army Research Laboratories focuses on improving the integration of robots into law enforcement SWAT teams to develop new tactics and investigates how robots can be used more effectively in a real-world scenario to increase safety and information gathering capabilities. And those are just two of the many projects that are going on at Mississippi State. Additionally, at Mississippi State University, they work with a number of organizations, including 4-H, to put together opportunities and competitions for students of all ages to learn about robotics and have some fun along the way. With that said, I'd like to welcome all of the witnesses here today. In particular, Mr. Kamen, it's good to hear from you and to have you be here and to explain these things to us and know how clearly committed you are to teaching children around the country technology skills that'll prepare them for a bright future. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The chair thanks the gentleman. Seeing no other members seeking an opening statement, we'll conclude with member opening statements. The chair would like to remind members that pursuant to committee rules, all members' opening statements will be made part of the record. And we do want to thank all of our witnesses for being with us here today, taking the time to prepare and to testify to the subcommittee. Today's witnesses will have the opportunity to give an opening statement, followed, of course, by questions from the members. Our panel for today's hearing will include Mr. Dean Kamen, founder of DECA Research, Dr. Sridhar Lakota, Herrick Professor of Engineering at the University of Michigan, Dr. Meg Jones, Assistant Professor of Communication, Culture, and Technology at Georgetown University, and Mr. Jeff Bernstein, President at Robotics Industries Association. We appreciate you all being here today, and we'll begin the panel with you, Mr. Kamen, and you are recognized for 5 minutes for an opening statement, please.
Thank you. So I was told I have only a few minutes, and I decided since a picture's worth 1,000 words and a video's worth 1,000 pictures, I took 2 videos. Trust me, they're each under 2 minutes long. One is sort of a general overview of FIRST, and it ties everybody together because it's the voice of God. It's Morgan Freeman from Mississippi, who after coming agreed to help us with a video because people trust the voice of God, and also said he will help us put FIRST in every school in Mississippi. So we need to talk. We work with, of course, in Chicago, RIC. We developed, my day job is medical stuff and robotics, and we built the arms that they're using for their haptic stuff there. And of course, we work with Texas in many ways, Massachusetts. You heard about how tied we are. But I'm going to show 2 videos. One is an overview of why robotics are going to be so valuable to the next generation and to this country in preparing to be competitive in the world. The second one's a minute long, and it's not the voice of God. It's a 7-year-old girl that helped prepare a video for the international version of FIRST because we're seeing, for instance, incredible growth in 86 countries. So another reason that you need to get serious about giving kids the skills they get through robotics is and you'll see in that second video, it's not robots, it's all the skill sets for the 21st century. And I hope you listen to this 7-year-old. Let's hear from the voice of God.
This is the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl of smarts, that is. It's a life-changing competition. It's kids having fun, competing, working together to dream up, design, and build robots.
It's just an exhilarating feeling. It's like I'm using power tools.
They're having the hardest fun they'll ever have. And they're becoming our next generation of engineers and innovators. First, come out! For inspiration and recognition of science and technology. My teachers were some of the greatest influences on my life by challenging and trusting me. These mentors got me to understand that I could do anything I put my mind to.
I'm around people that I can get along with, that we can talk computer lingo with.
Scientists and engineers ought to stand side by side with athletes and entertainers as role models. And here at the White House, we're going to lead by example. We're going to show young people how cool science can be.
250,000 kids aged 6 to 18 compete at all different levels. In 2 FIRST Lego Leagues, the FIRST Tech Challenge. And at the high school level, the FIRST Robotics Competition.
The only difference between this sport and all the others is every kid on our teams can turn pro. There's a job out there for every one of these kids.
There's no doubt FIRST works.
10 or 15 or 20 years from today, some kid in those stands will have cured Alzheimer's or AIDS or cancer or built an engine that doesn't pollute. Look at these kids. They're the future.
I feel like I can go and do anything I want to do because of this program.
Someone took the time to guide and inspire me. It changed my life. Take some time. Go to usfirst.org.
So there's the voice of God. Now we go to a 7-year-old who's going to show the world with FIRST.
This isn't a robot. It very well may have hydraulic arms, a drivetrain, and a circuit board, but this isn't a robot. This is a lesson in humility, hard work, and collaboration. This is a CrossFit workout for the muscle upstairs. This is an apple for the next generation of Newtons. It's a lot of things, but this isn't a robot. This is a roadmap that leads straight to engineering. This is a rock to shatter 1,000 glass ceilings, a rope to pull a generation up and out of poverty, a sledgehammer to break down cultural barriers, and a universal language spoken in every nation on Earth. And because of that, this is a compass that can help point the way to peace. But please, don't think this is just a robot. This is Glastonbury for technology. This is mission control for the next moonshot. This is the Rosetta Stone to help translate the future. This is the sport that will help us win tomorrow. This is the software to program ourselves to cure cancer, build a clean engine, or step foot on Mars. But this isn't a robot. It's a machine to build the people who will change the world.
Mr. Chairman, if I might just ask, Dean, if we can, is it okay if we put that on the committee's website?
I'd be proud to have you put it.
It's there. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Cota, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement, please.
Yep. Yeah. Chairman Burgess, Ranking Member Schakowsky, distinguished subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss issues of critical importance to American economic competitiveness: robotics, artificial intelligence, and manufacturing. My name is Sridhar Kota. I'm the Herrick Professor of Engineering at the University of Michigan and also the director for a new think tank called M4Sight, the Alliance for Manufacturing Foresight. M4Sight works to bring together government, industry, and research institutions to scan the horizon for emerging trends and promising opportunities for American manufacturing. We help to build public-private partnerships related to manufacturing innovation. We respond to long-range technical questions from government and industry, and we work to identify best practices for training the next generation workforce. Our ultimate aim is to enable the United States to gain a long-term edge in economic competitiveness by strengthening domestic manufacturing. 30 years ago, when I was a graduate student in mechanical engineering, robotics was already a topic on everybody's mind. But back then, the dominant vision of robotics was of machines replacing human labor, taking over manufacturing tasks like welding and painting. Today, researchers and firms tend to think of robots in a different light, as collaborative tools to enhance productivity of factory workers, as means to assist soldiers on dangerous missions, as co-drivers to enhance automobile safety and efficiency, and as co-inspectors to enable continuous monitoring and maintenance of high-value assets such as bridges and wind turbines. As artificial intelligence matures, there's promise that intelligent machines can augment certain types of human decision-making in fields ranging from medicine to manufacturing. In short, robotics is now about augmenting and improving human work rather than replacing it. While robotics and AI innovations hold incredible promise, it's an open question whether the resulting technology products will be manufactured in the United States. Despite federal annual investment of over $140 billion in science and technology, America's trade deficits in advanced technology products moved from a surplus in 2001 to a deficit of over $90 billion in 2015. To strengthen America's competitiveness in age of advanced robotics and AI, we need to build the knowledge, skills, and infrastructure to anchor production here. Put concisely, we need to be thinking about translational research and workforce training. I would first like to discuss translational research, how government and industry can ensure that existing investments in basic research turn into useful new products, including robots and AI technologies that create wealth for Americans and advance our national interests. What I believe we need right now is a whole-of-government approach that leverages the strengths and missions of different federal science and technology agencies to help ensure that we can translate promising discoveries and inventions into successful manufactured products. This need not be costly. A National Innovation Foundation could be created by consolidating relevant offices at a dozen or more existing agencies. Such an entity could be tasked with identifying the most promising basic research being undertaken across the government and building public-private partnerships to invest in transforming that research into American-made products. The idea would be to maximize the return on taxpayers' investments in R&D. The second policy matter I would like to discuss is education and workforce training, how federal, state, and local governments, working with employers, can ensure that Americans have the requisite knowledge and skills to build great products in the age of advanced robotics and AI. In spite of our manufacturing losses in recent decades, there are now a large number of open positions in manufacturing, and as about 415,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs in the United States, according to Society of Manufacturing Engineers. I believe the biggest long-term risk to U.S. manufacturing isn't foreign competition. It's too little awareness and interest in engineering and manufacturing careers starting at an early age. While high schools commonly require students to dissect a frog, few require students to disassemble a power tool, let alone a robot. This needs to change. Primarily the programs like FIRST Robotics, we all just saw these wonderful videos. It's an innovative program that challenges students to work together to build game-playing robots in an atmosphere of professionalism, and it is the roadmap to engineering. It is the roadmap to innovation, and right now it's currently done as an after-school extracurricular activity. This is the kind of program that we need to bring into the mainstream in order to mainstream curricula in K through 12. And that's the only way we can build a foundation for that next generation of innovation and advanced manufacturing community. So through smart research investments and sustained focus on education and training programs like FIRST Robotics, we can help ensure that these innovations truly improve American lives and livelihoods. Thank you.
Chair, thanks, gentlemen. Chair recognizes Dr. Jones. 5 minutes for your opening statement, please.
Chairman Burgess, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you very much for putting on this Disruptor series and for inviting me to testify before you today. With all of the excitement that comes with these ingenious advancements in robotics are ethical, policy, and legal questions. Robot ethics and robotics policy conjure problems like how we avoid creating our mechanical overlords and when AI should have rights. These are questions for the future, but what I'm going to talk about today is a really, really simple problem, and that is that robots don't have screens. And this is incredibly disruptive to privacy protection in the United States. For the last 50 years, screens have been how we interacted with our information and communication technologies. You engage with the cloud or a colleague or a retailer through the interface on your desktop, your laptop, and then your smartphone and your tablet. And for the last 20 years, the internet age has used that screen to create, collect, process, trade, and use your data. And it's through that same screen that you can figure out how your data is collected and used. You go to the bottom of the page and you click on the blue link that says privacy policy. And this is the notice and choice regime that information exchange around the world has been built upon. And the idea is, of course, is that the data controller notifies you of what they're going to do with your data, and you can choose to engage with the system or not. There are, of course, problems with relying on this form of consent in an information age. People can't dedicate all of the time it would take to read all of those policies. Even if they could, they can't necessarily understand them, and even if they could read and understand them, they wouldn't necessarily be able to assess the future uses and harms of their information. Participating in one's data is increasingly difficult as screens get smaller, and we've seen this with smartphones and wearables already. But robots often don't have any screen at all. Robots are categorized within, some robots are categorized within the Internet of Things, and as you're aware from previous hearings, the Internet of Things is a catch-all for the movement to connect everyday objects to make them smart using sensors, Wi-Fi, and the cloud. Like most technologies in the Internet of Things, there is no screen. So if you want to know the terms of use or the privacy policy, you can't scroll down on anything. So how does one figure out what information is being used, collected and used, and why? There was a 2015 Federal Trade Commission report on this subject, and they suggested using video tutorials, setup wizards, and privacy dashboards. Treating the Internet of Things like an extension of the Internet, these are tools that provide notice and participation for the good old days of personal computers and apps. At Georgetown, we bought a bunch of Hello Barbies to figure out how we would know what she was collecting about us and what she did with the information just by interacting with her. Now, to set up Hello Barbie, you have to click a bunch of accept buttons, like most things. But we really wanted to know what she would tell us, so we asked her a number of times if she could keep a secret, or we would tell her something and then we would say, "You're not going to share that with anyone, are you?" And she couldn't really process the the questions that we were asking her. But when you asked her about her privacy policy, she said the adult could find details about privacy on page 2 of the booklet that came in the box. So this is essentially the same problems that exist with relying on notice and choice in the internet age, except you have the extra step that you have to go find this booklet or the box. More importantly, what if it's not your Barbie? We're moving beyond the days of personal computers with smart objects, smart people, and smart environments. When you get into someone else's driverless car, or you see a drone flying overhead, or you walk into someone else's smart office, what information is being collected? How would you know? Whose drone is that? What company makes it? Do they collect information? Do they map your face for facial recognition? Where's the booklet that came in the box? And even if you did know the answer to those questions, what can you really do about it? Notice and choice, even beyond the practical problems, breaks down at a theoretical level in what I call the Internet of Other People's Things, of which many robots will be a part. So I know some people think that privacy is dead. In my written testimony, I noted a few statistics, but one of them is that in January 2016, more American adults were worried about about their privacy than losing their main source of income. So people care, and I think that if we want to usher in the type of advanced robotics that we want, we have to start by innovating some of our policy approaches, including privacy. Thank you.
Chair, thanks, gentlelady. Mr. Bernstein, recognized for 5 minutes for your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Chairman Burgess, and Chairman Upton, and Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the subcommittee. I want to really thank you for having the Robotic Industries Association here to participate in this series. RIA has been around since 1974, and we are based in Ann Arbor, Michigan, go blue. And what's interesting about RIA is that it represents 400 companies that are driving innovation, growth, and better, safer, and higher paying jobs in manufacturing and service industries. Now, I've been there for over 30 years, and I have to tell you, this is the most exciting period for robotics and American innovation in robotics in the entire time I've been there. We think that the key to staying competitive in manufacturing, in particular, is to implement advanced robotics. We see what's happening around the world. RIA is in China, we're in Korea, we're in Japan. We see the efforts that are going on there and in Europe, and we think we have an opportunity here to create more jobs and to save jobs that are already here. I'd like to, if you don't mind, highlight some of our member companies and the innovations they're working on. In the Boston area, Rethink Robotics is developing collaborative robots. These are new kind of robots that work side by side with people that don't require safety fences between them. Or Soft Robotics, also in Boston, who's taken on a challenge that's kind of plagued the industry for many years of how to grip different parts. So you have very fragile things that have to be picked up by a robot, like produce or vegetables and tomatoes, peaches, all the things that agriculture cares about. You have these hard parts, rugged, on assembly lines. You used to have to change the gripper, the hand on the robot. But now, thanks to companies like Soft Robotics, we might be able to do it with just one gripper. Aethon in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, creating an autonomous robot that delivers and tracks medical supplies in hospitals, allowing the staff to focus more time on patient care, which is really what we want. And how does this all play out at user companies? Well, there's a company that we work closely with called Vickers Engineering in New Troy, Michigan, a precision machining company that provides solutions to automotive, oil and gas, agriculture, defense, and industrial markets. They had trouble keeping people in dull, repetitive, and dangerous jobs. They had to keep hiring and retraining. It was hurting productivity. They said, why don't we take a shot at robotics? And they did. Their business tripled, bought more robots, and at the same time, they increased their head count. And we're seeing this across the country with small and medium-sized companies as well as large ones. One thing the U.S. is fortunate to have is the greatest group of system integrators in the world. Now, who are these companies? These are folks that put together the systems that actually make the robots work on the factory floor, that integrate with the other machines and equipment and tie into the Internet of Things. Companies like Genesis Systems in Davenport, Iowa, and Matrix Design in South Elgin, Illinois, Schneider Packaging Equipment in Brewerton, New York, Tennessee Rand from Chattanooga, Tennessee. These are just a few of the certified robot integrators that RIA like to acknowledge. Today's robots offer U.S. manufacturers improvements in efficiency that are driving profits and employment, as we said. We issued a white paper on this called Robots Fuel the Next Wave of Productivity and Job Growth. You may read otherwise, the robots are job killers, but our data doesn't support that. What we see is that whenever robot sales rise, unemployment falls. And when the opposite happens, when robot sales fall, unemployment rises. You don't hear that in the media too often. We understand the importance of education, STEM education, and training and retraining to make sure that we're prepared our workforce for the future jobs and for the present jobs. There are groups like Ramtech in Marion, Ohio, a government and industry-supported collaboration that provides training to high school and college students along with incumbent workers to support industry's needs for training on robotics and automation equipment. And we hope that programs like this will proliferate, because by working together, industry, government, and academia can help make sure that our workers are prepared for the future. I personally appreciate this opportunity to highlight the important role that robotics is playing in advancing our economy and creating not only safer, better, and higher-paying jobs, but also improving society and our health and our livelihood and our long-term ability to be productive members of society. I hope that those of you who aren't involved will join the House Robotics Caucus with Congressman Rob Whittle and Congressman Mike Doyle. And we value their work and look forward to continuing the dialogue on advanced robotics. Thank you very much.
Chair thanks the gentleman, and the chair would note that Mr. Doyle is a member of the full Committee of Energy and Commerce. So I thank you all for your testimony, and we'll move now into the question and answer part of the hearing. And Mr. Bernstein, let me just ask you, because in your written testimony you referenced using robotics to do jobs that perhaps would be inherently too dangerous for a person to do.
Yes.
Hazmat situation. We're all familiar with the bomb disabling robots that several of our police departments use in Dallas, Texas, July 7th. Kind of a unique situation where there was a shooter who had killed several Dallas police officers and an officer with the Dallas Area Rapid Transit. And the individual was contained in a garage but could not be controlled. And ultimately, Chief Brown made what I consider a very courageous, kind of unique decision to use the bomb disabling robot to actually deliver a bomb to this individual and end the problem. I'm sure from your association, are you aware of that instance?
Yes, I am.
Are there thoughts that the association has on the use of the robot in that situation? Again, I think Chief Brown was courageous, and I'm grateful that he made the decision. I'm grateful that he prevented any further loss of life, but obviously it poses some new questions.
It does pose new questions, and I think ideally robots wouldn't be involved in harming people. It's one of the first laws of robotics that Isaac Asimov laid out. However, in this particular case, if you take the word robot out of the equation, we sent in equipment that would save police officers' lives. And so whether it was a robot or some other way to get that in there, if we could have got a person in there, we would have taken that shooter out in that way. So in my opinion, that was the right choice. And it was a good use of the technology because it was saving police officers' lives.
Very good, and I appreciate your answer. So, Dean Kamen, earlier this week, the 100-year study on artificial intelligence released a report titled Artificial Intelligence and Life in 2030. So the good news, the panel found that there's no cause for concern that artificial intelligence is an imminent threat to humankind or the United States Congress. Actually, I just added that. I didn't find that. In fact, the findings of the group of academics from the University of Texas at Austin, MIT, Harvard, and others concluded that increasingly useful applications of artificial intelligence with potentially profound positive impacts on society and economy were likely to emerge between now and 2030. So basically, do you agree with their assessment? You spend a lot of time in this space.
Well, I think that the whole term artificial intelligence, or for that matter, robotics, means different things to people, let's say, within that industry and to the public. I'd almost define robotics, as seen by the public, as any piece of technology that wasn't around when you were a kid. Because the fact is, we've been robotically doing more and more and more since the Industrial Revolution started. Before that, knitting machines made things robotic. And artificial intelligence, a machine that is programmed to do a function, the calculator you have, was considered, a mathematician 30, 40, 50 years ago. I think we should always be concerned, as you heard from Dr. Jones, about unintended consequences of applying technology to anything. But artificial intelligence, like most good tools, will just support the real stuff. And we could all use a little more of the real intelligence. And I think as long as humans with good judgment and good ethics are deploying these tools for the betterment of the world, we're okay. It would be naive to assume that you can never do damage with it. But again, the first tool, the rock, could help you build a house or break your thumb. The first use of fire could make us have a life and could burn down your house. Every new technology bears the potential to be misused. But putting your head in the sand is just going to allow somebody else to dominate that technology. And I'd rather be the ones that decide how to develop it and how to use it.
Thank you. Can you, my background's in healthcare. Can you talk just a little bit? I think some of your work has been in the healthcare space, and of course, we're all familiar now with robotics in the operating room. Could you speak to that just a little bit? What the future might hold for us?
So you mentioned in your opening remarks Rosie, and I think, again, the word robot, coming originally from the world of science fiction, always displays the robot as this anthropomorphic thing. I think of all the things that robots will evolve to, the least likely is that, because we're pretty good at being what we are. We like being what we are, and we're not going to spend a lot of time and money making something else to do what we are and what we like to do. You're not going to build a robot to take your trip to Disney. I think robots will be used, like other technologies that are developed, to augment, as you heard from Dr. Koda, what we do. There'll be robots much bigger than us, like bulldozers. We don't like digging ditches. There'll be robots much smaller than us, ones that'll travel through your vascular system, go in there and tweak that heart valve so you don't need to have it removed or replaced. Robots will get very small. Robots will get very big. Robots will not look like humans. But in the health care field, they will change so dramatically the process of taking care of people that a doctor 50 years from today will not recognize, and certainly a hospital will not look like it looks today. Nanotechnology, proteomics, genomics, the ability to use robotic technology to get to critical places without destroying vital tissue. it's going to change virtually every concept we've had in medicine, more than you've seen medicine change so far in your lifetime.
And it has changed a lot, even in my short lifetime. Chair thanks the gentleman for his answers. Chair recognizes Ms. Schakowsky. 5 minutes for your questions, please.
Thank you, all of you. It's been a fascinating panel and really excellent testimony. I wanted to ask you, Dr. Jones, a couple of questions. In all our exuberance, I'm happy that you raised some issues that we, also need to pay attention to: privacy and data security. Robots, almost by definition, collect a vast amount of information because they need to sense the environment they're in and process the information and take action based on that information. And as you pointed out in your testimony, many robots are or will be internet connected. And at the subcommittee's hearing on wearable devices, we heard about notice and choice like those you mentioned earlier. We generally rely on screens to provide the interface that allows for notice and choice, but as with wearables, robots generally don't have those screens. So let me also say, for household robots that are already on the market, let me ask you, what is the mechanism used to provide notice to consumers? And is it always a question of the privacy policies are just included in the box? You better take them out and save them?
Yes, for the most part. When you buy a device for your home, you're still at least within the Internet of Things, not other people's things. And so when you put a Nest system, for instance, in your home, you go through, you click a number of boxes, and you can find out more information about what's collected. And sometimes you have to just to set the thing up. And so there is sometimes increased amount of notice in the Internet of Things. However, if you walk into someone else's house that has, say, a personal assistant robot that wires the home and does voice recognition or facial recognition, you don't have a way to express to that system, hey, I don't like that. Don't do that to me. I don't want you to map my face and store it somewhere. And I think that is really the next hurdle, and it's a wonderful interdisciplinary problem. It requires a lot of technical considerations as well as policy and ethical considerations. I don't think that it's necessarily a regulatory change. That being said, I do think that reliance on notice and choice will have to take a secondary seat to something.
At one of these hearings, I brought a privacy policy that was included in the box and kind of unfurled it. It was very long. It was very legalistic, very small print, challenging. But you also mentioned that online, how many people, let's be honest, read all the words before they push agree? Because you know that you're not going to get in unless you agree. And so, I think these are challenges that we need to figure out. But let me ask you this. You mentioned a study by the Pew Research Center that found that a vast majority of adults felt it was important to have control over what information was collected about them and who could get that information. And do you agree that most consumers would prefer a more customizable approach?
So this I don't know, and I don't think that there's a lot of surveys on privacy, and I think that they're not tailored to regulatory answers a lot of the time. So you'll hear people say they really care about privacy, but it's not clear whether they want a set standard, like the European version of privacy, or they want an adjusted type of notice and choice, a more sort of libertarian privacy integrated into the way they engage with ICTs. So I can't say for sure. I think that Americans probably don't care. They just want privacy.
Okay. When we discuss privacy and data security issues, some have argued that we should only be concerned about a narrow set of data, of personal information, specifically personal financial information. However, consumers have more than financial concerns, and I'm just wondering if you could discuss the privacy concerns that robots have beyond the financial, and how do we broaden the discussion to ensure we understand the emerging technologies and the privacy concerns that come with those new technologies.
So for anyone who cares about their physical safety, a robot could easily be something to be concerned about, because if a robot registers that you're near them, for instance, someone could know where you're at. We have seen a number of apps that have shown the location of women, for instance, that have been not held positively by Congress or the public at large, but physical location data is one thing. The idea that you can figure out a lot of things about someone that they don't want you to know by putting together a few pieces of information, we know that that's also true. So right now we have a ton of little pieces of information that get put together that can show basically your route to work, where you work, what you do, where you go to lunch, who you go to lunch with. And by putting sensors in the environment, you just increase that dossier on every individual that's moving through those spaces. And what's interesting about robotics is they're not just in public spaces, they're in private spaces, they're in semi-private spaces, and so you can link these together in really troubling ways.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentlelady. Gentlelady yields back. Chair recognizes the gentlelady from Indiana. Ms. Brooks, 5 minutes for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've always really enjoyed the Disruptor series and pleased to be here to talk about robotics today. Fortunately, our former mayor of Indianapolis, Mayor Greg Ballard, had the foresight in 2012 to start Indiana State Robotics Initiative to help build that skilled workforce in the pipeline of students. And it is that cross-sector partnership between government, corporate, nonprofit organizations to make robotics accessible to all Indiana students. And I might say, Mr. Kamen, I have visited the Carmel Tech Hounds. Carmel High School has a first robotics team that's been competing for quite some time. And now, actually, in January, over 160 teams competed in the Indianapolis VEX robotics competition. But throughout Indiana, over 40,000 students are being exposed to robotics, and hopefully will continue that interest into the future, because I do believe that we need to start this exposure very young. What I'm very curious about, Mr. Kamen, is based on all of your experience, what's the one thing you would like us to walk away from in this hearing with respect to how we continue the growth of the FIRST program and of robotics in this country? What is one thing you'd like for us to remember?
So when I was first asked to come, I thought it would be, hey, let's celebrate, figure out how to grow the robotics program, because we know it works. And I was told, Dean, that would be optimistic. You should know that part of this hearing is going to be to deal with real concerns. By the way, some real concerns, but other concerns that some people have that, you know, robots will take jobs. You heard Mr. Bernstein said, and I said, it's hard for me to believe that in the 21st century, people will think that advanced technologies are going to do anything except grow this opportunity. In that regard, I took a slide. I visited Beijing with the president of the U.S., the National Academy of Engineers, and our chairman for the first ever coalition meeting of the Royal Society at London, the National Academy, and the Chinese Academy of Engineers, which, by the way, is way larger than ours. We get to Beijing to talk about the grand challenges, but I'm whisked away by somebody who takes me to a local school in Beijing. By the way, China, he tells me, has 4,000 FIRST teams. They use FIRST because it inspires kids to get out of we're good at learning engineering, but now we learn how to be innovators like you Americans. And he takes me in there and he shows me this picture on the wall of the president of China. Could you put that slide up? And I asked him, will you please tell me why there's a picture of the president of China in this school where I was looking at a FIRST field in Beijing? And he translated it for me and said, robotics will become an entry point and impetus for growth of the third industrial revolution. Mm-hmm. What I want you all to go away understanding is, if America wants to remain a leader in the world economically, in every other way. Our security, our economy is going to depend on us remaining leaders in the technologies that result from learning how to design and build the next generation of technology, which we generally all call robots now because it's actuators, it's sensors, it's artificial, it's the collection of everything that will allow humans to keep moving. And if anybody thinks that that's not the case, you're going to be a drag on the future of this country. That's what I think. We need to focus on giving kids the tool sets for the next century, and robotics is a great vehicle to do it.
Thank you. Dr. Cota, what would you say are the most significant barriers to investment in advanced robotics? What are the challenges that you are seeing?
Barriers to investment in advanced robotics. You know, we have this National Robotics Initiative, and actually there's a new solicitation out for a Manufacturing Innovation Institute in robotics, which is all very positive. And I think we should continue to work along the lines of creating next generation robots that are, collaborating with humans. But I don't see any more than that. I think the biggest barrier, I want to pick up on what Dean Kamen said. The biggest challenge and biggest opportunity we have right now is really the robots. It is a gateway to engineering. It is a gateway to designing and building things. And this is the way where we can really get kids excited about going into engineering field and manufacturing, because that's what it takes to convert an idea into a product.
I agree, but are there barriers that are causing us, that are stopping, or what are the barriers?
Well, the barriers to, you're talking about research or actually education and workforce development?
Yes.
Okay, the workforce development side, the barrier is, the question, I'll turn it around and say, we have right now, this program is an after-school extracurricular program. Those kids who are already motivated are doing incredible things. Well, why can't we expose? We should expose them to every kid in school. And just like we ask every student to dissect a frog, just about, why not ask them to work on this first robotics? Now, the barrier could potentially be, it's more than the funding, is actually the requirements for schools to check certain boxes to meet the curriculum requirements. But there is a way we can actually, we know it's working. We can actually map this, what they do in first robotics experience, into some of the core curriculum requirements in terms of creative activities and science and math. That's where the barrier is to actually bringing key stakeholders together and having a discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair, thanks. The gentlelady yields back. Chair, thanks. The gentlelady. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts. 5 minutes for your questions, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks again to all the witnesses for coming and for your testimony earlier. I know that this hearing isn't about specifically autonomous cars, but autonomous cars are a type of robot that will soon be entering our daily lives. And they clearly present some of the ethical issues that come up in the realm of robotics. Science Magazine recently highlighted a series of surveys to determine consumer attitudes towards autonomous cars. The researchers found that surveyed participants generally support the idea of autonomous cars that might sacrifice passengers to save people outside the vehicle, but they don't actually want to ride in those cars. In other words, people generally choose to save themselves, which I'm sure isn't a huge shock to anybody. The survey illustrates, though, the so-called trolley problem when faced with two negative scenarios. How do you choose? So, Dr. Jones, with the example of autonomous cars, without artificial intelligence, a person is going to have to make the decision on how to program the car. Should it be programmed to protect a passenger at the expense of others? The other way around? How do you make that judgment call? It's a difficult question, but what's happening now with autonomous cars and other types of robots, and if you play out that hypothetical, if you will, for me, I'd love to get your guidance on that judgment.
Well, I think that right now is the perfect time to answer how we answer that question, which is a great policy problem. And there are two really innovative ideas that I've heard recently. I love the trolley problem. Even a 2-year-old can make a choice about a trolley problem. There's a YouTube video where he moves all of the people to one side and then runs over all of them. That's one way you can do it.
Which 2-year-old was that exactly?
My 2-year-old. The other idea is that why do we why is this a decision that is automatic in every vehicle? The trolley problem asks an individual to look at a moral situation and decide, what are your ethics here? And now we say, how do we put this in every single car? And so Jason Millar argues that that should be a setting. When you get a driverless car, it's your setting, just like a trolley problem would be. It is a setting that you say, do you want to run over the kittens or do you want to, drive off the cliff? So that's one idea, is to keep autonomy in the hands of the user for ethical questions, which in itself is an ethical design choice. The other is a website called Moral Machines from MIT that is crowdsourcing people's ideas, what they should do, how the car should be designed, not based on the ethics of the engineer, but based on what the general public's idea of ethics are in any given moment, and then those would be embedded into the car. And so you have less of the ethics of Silicon Valley and the choices of Silicon Valley and other places. I don't mean to, that's sort of a computer robotics, that's not really true, washing into DC and asking DC to respond to it. And I think that what these innovative ideas are doing is saying, let's all participate in the design and ethical choices that are going into these technologies. And so those are just two alternatives, because there's no right answer to the trolley problem. That's why it's a great, that's why it's a great question.
Dr. Kamen?
I think you can reduce these to philosophical, esoteric discussions, which are fun, and maybe there's no perfect answer. A more basic question might be, in reality, this year we'll kill 42,000 people on the highways with drivers that are tweeting or not paying attention or are drunk. We all know that if a single autonomous vehicle tomorrow hurt or killed somebody, there'd be a major national debate about whether there should be another vehicle like that for the foreseeable future. Yet every year for decades, we kill tens of thousands of people. We hospitalize millions of people. It's the devil we know. Mm-hmm. Instead of solving a very esoteric question, you might ask, how soon will it be that at least augmented systems would make cars so much safer that instead of arguing about whether they should be allowed, we should start arguing about whether we should be able to sell vehicles that don't have these systems, because we know how many people we're killing all the time.
And at the risk of getting into that philosophical debate, I would agree with you that we say, let's move forward, because look, if we can reduce that from 42,000 to 1, obviously that's an extraordinary, or to 0, to whatever it is, to less than 42,000, that's an extraordinary innovation, and we want to incentivize that. The question basically, and perhaps you can shed a little bit of expertise in the 7 seconds I'll give you, but if it comes down to essentially an algorithm of saying if-then, right, in a complex if-then decision tree for computer code, that is then scaled up across every single car, that is a choice that somebody's got to make. Or so I'm not even asking so much what that right decision is, but what's the right way for evaluating how we make those decisions, understanding that if we can make progress on this, that's a tremendous, and we don't want to stop that innovation, but it does bring up ethical issues that we haven't had to confront in this scenario before.
And I guess all I was saying is those are fantastic debates to have, and as we all know, the good is the enemy of the great. I guess what I would come back to saying, however, is we should discuss those issues and what the available technologies are in the context of the real alternatives. And we should be accelerating the use of these technologies that overall will hugely reduce injuries and deaths, because these technologies don't get distracted. Inevitably, as we said before, every powerful technology can have mischievous and nefarious users. Every powerful technology will eventually show a weakness or need to be improved. But the day we start saying, because of those issues, we will slow down or stop progress, is the day we're in big trouble.
Fair.
Gentleman yields back. Chair, thanks the gentleman. I believe we're going to have time for a second round if anyone wishes to stay. Let me initiate that, and Mr. Kamen, I'm going to stay with you on that same concept. And we had a tragic accident in our district with a distracted driving situation where 4 women, 2 in one car, 2 in the other, head-on collision, they all died. And the lane departure warning device that, yeah, you're right. It almost asked why. this should be like analog brakes. This should be like a supplemental restraint device or an airbag or a seatbelt. It almost should be standard equipment, especially in the day and age where we all have a device that could potentially distract us while we're driving. So I think that is a powerful concept, and one which, of course, on this subcommittee we'll continue to explore because we have the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration under our jurisdiction. So I appreciate your comments there. But just more broadly, and you now have touched upon something that I kind of debated whether or not I should bring up, but just let's talk. We've got a panel of experts. I mean, we live under the tyranny of federal agencies, at least that's my opinion. Mr. Kennedy may disagree. Federal Trade Commission, Consumer Product Safety Commission, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, just this subcommittee's jurisdiction, but there's also the Department of Labor, Health and Human Services, Department of Energy, Department of Education, Department of Energy, Department of Commerce. I almost had a Rick Perry moment there for a minute. Department of Commerce. So how do you see the intersection of all of these federal agencies? I mean, they don't make anything neat or cool like you all do. They write regulations to regulate the neat and cool stuff that you all do. So just, I know it's a big discussion, but as briefly as you can you just kind of give us some sense of the direction of how the regulatory environment should proceed in this very new area? And Mr. Dean Kamen, we'll start with you and just work down the table, if you would.
Well, I can give you one very relevant to the self-driving car, I think, because you have a regulatory agency, NHTSA, and you have one called the FAA. And there's a lesson here. When I learned to fly, you had simple autopilots. They weren't very good, and they could get your wings. They could do a few simple things. But you were very clearly told, when you go take your flight test, you may not turn that on. It was a crutch. They want to make sure you could really fly that plane. You're not allowed to use it. Over the decades, as those things got better, they started requiring them in sophisticated aircraft, because when you're doing Mach 0.8 and you're coming into a very low ceiling, and no human is as good as that autopilot. And then they went to allowing you to use it, then testing you on how you use it. Then they made it part of what's called the MEL, the minimal equipment list. You're not allowed to fly this airplane under these conditions unless that thing is working and is on. I think we shifted. The FAA has demonstrated we went from people have to fly to it's not safe unless that thing is working. And you legally can't do it. And you wouldn't want to get on an airliner traveling around this country if that autopilot on minimum conditions that was going to land coming out of that fog and touching down 2 seconds later. It's not legal to do it. It's not safe to do it. I think, certainly in your lifetime, the question is going to be with somebody sitting up there, should we allow people to drive cars? I know they think it's fun, but this is so dangerous that allowing them that privilege of running around at 60 miles an hour with a 3,000-pound machine, and we can't be sure they're not drunk and tired, I'm not sure we should allow that anymore. That's why we have autopilots. And you're going to see that change happen. But human understanding always lags the rate at which technical opportunities arise. And it's always the next generation that adopts it. You know, what was indefensible to your parents was indispensable to you. And what your kids will think of as normal, you will be concerned about. And technology really is anything that wasn't available when you were a kid. But I think NHTSA should take a lesson from FAA. They both regulate critical activities, but as we see technology developing, we know there are loopholes, we know there are disasters, we know things can go wrong, but that shouldn't present an alternative that we don't aggressively go after improving.
Very well. Dr. Cota.
In a different context, I was making a similar statement about how FDA could potentially take some ideas from FAA. I have had a little bit of experience working on aircraft design. And what I was surprised to note is that, which many of you probably know already, and you do, FAA, if you're designing any new component or system, whatever it is for an aircraft, there are a clear set of guidelines and regulations, what's safe and what's not. And by the way, NHTSA, FDA, FAA, they all care about safety. I'm glad they do. But the way the FAA works, then you probably know, DERs, they have experts who are authorized.
DER is Designated Engineering Representative.
designated engineering, yeah, DERs for FAA. So if you're a small business or a large business, they work with you to make sure you are following the proper regulation. So you're not spending 3 years designing, building, and going and finding out that, oh, that doesn't FAA doesn't accept it. These regulations are meant for the right reasons, and also they actually help accelerate innovation if they do it right. So on that note, similar DERs we can have not only with NHTSA, but also with even FDA and others too. So I think that's a very good practice.
I'm going to suspend that question temporarily and go back to Mr. Kennedy for 5 minutes for questions, please.
I'm happy to yield you another 3 minutes if you want.
Very well. We'll continue on the regulatory environment going forward. Dr. Jones.
I'd just like the record to reflect that he said that innovation accelerates, or regulation accelerates innovation, so there you go.
Regulation could.
I was asking the panel, not.
I can repeat it if that's helpful. I think that it's important to remember that, like Mr. Kamen said, when we talk about robotics, AI, we're talking about technology. It's just a really broad term, and so the ethical issues with drones are not the same ethical issues as with driverless cars. So it would be very hard to sit down and say, how do we solve all of the ethical problems with robotics with using the same mechanism? And so I think inevitably these technological advancements occur within sectors.
But I will interrupt you just for a moment, because so many times at the federal agency level, it is putting the square peg in the round hole. I mean, that's what they do.
So the FAA handling drones and the transportation, people handling driverless cars causes lots of problems. And I was at a Department of Homeland Security roundtable, I guess you would call it, that was also sponsored by NSF. And what it did was brought these people together, and we realized that, okay, a lot of these drone problems are not the same problems as the driverless cars, and that's fine. But there was some shared problems, and there was some policy innovation that was happening in the driverless cars that had not occurred in the in the drone area. And so I think that there were huge benefits to bringing everyone to the table, and I think that is one of the federal government, a great role for the federal government is saying, you guys have to keep talking to each other. You have to keep coming to the table. We don't want redundancies and that I think can occur across agencies. And this was a 2-day event where vocabulary was shared, that we realized we were talking over each other and using different words for the same things. And so it was a great use of time, and I think that a really simple, what can we do, is just continue to create these deliberative spaces.
Mr. Bernstein, either your thoughts or your association's thoughts on the regulatory environment going forward and its ability to facilitate or impede development.
Well, in preparation for this hearing, I talked to some of our members about that, and they don't see regulatory issues as a major problem in preventing them from advancing robotics. They did talk about some of the issues related to safety. So our association developed the American National Robot Safety Standard. And when you got to this era of collaborative robots, right, so the OSHA inspectors knew about when the robot was behind a fence, how to treat that. But now we have these collaborative robot installations that are there, and it's different from region to region. And it's also different from country to country. And so our members are saying, look, we set up a safe application here in the U.S., but then when we go to Canada, we got to deal with changing it to meet another safety regulation. Is there some way that these international applications that are safe in one country can be seen as safe in the other? Is there something the government could do on that? But that's as far as it went in terms of the regulatory discussion.
Very well. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts. 5 minutes for questions, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just keep it, if I can, to 30 seconds for each of you. Given the issues that you've explored in your testimony and the questions, 30 seconds each, what recommendations would you give to Congress as we try to balance these issues and incentivize the innovation going forward? What should we be thinking about? What should be top of mind? What should we do? What shouldn't we do? 30 seconds each. Dr. Kamen.
If you wanted the answer related to regulation, I think any rational person realizes well-established regulations that allow people to interact consistently. I mean, there'd be no internet. Clearly, a regulatory environment can be hugely useful. Unfortunately, the time it takes to get clarity and get some of these regulations in place as technology is moving faster and faster is making the time difference between when the thing is possible to when the regulation has clarity is slowing things down, and there's a natural incentive of business to move faster and faster, and there is a natural incentive of regulators to be more and more conservative and concerned, and that gap is getting so large that it's slowing down access to medical miracles, it's slowing down opportunities. So I would urge you to find a way to make sure that all the regulators are highly incentivized to do things quickly, even if it's incrementally, to do it quickly and do it with certainty.
Thank you. Dr. Cota?
Quick answer. Well said. Just to add one more point, this going back to things like DERs, what FAA does. Let's find analogous components in other NHTSA and FDA and what have you from a regulation point of view. The one more thing I want to add is that the strategic and coordinated investment by the federal government, not each agency running in different directions. If you want true innovation, we need to connect the dots. So the best ideas coming out of National Science Foundation, from NASA, and the Department of Defense, leveraging the procurement capability of Department of Defense. So these are the things we can connect the dots and accelerate innovation, including regulation. That's one important thing I want to suggest.
Thank you. Dr. Jones?
I would suggest that the balance of pros and cons is adjusted. I think that people are left out when technology advances, and often the policies that we we just say, here's the pros, here's a con. The pros outweigh the cons, and so we're making this choice. But instead to embrace the cons as part of the policy solution itself. And I think we've heard a lot about not just job displacement today, but also what do we do with the displaced? That's all part, I think, of the same policy, not a choice to say, well, these factories have these benefits, but to make sure that people who don't design and don't have these technologies are also part of the policy equation.
Thank you.
I would say continue to support the National Robotics Initiative. That had a major impact around the world in drawing attention to the importance of robotics. And in the U.S., I think that stimulated innovation. I think that we need to continue establishing centers that get the technology that's being developed in the U.S. into the hands of small and medium-sized companies. We have some mechanisms in place now. I think we could do more. And I think the training issue is very important. We have to prepare the workforce for the jobs of the future. And as I said, the jobs today. The number one challenge our members face, they can't fill all the jobs that they have open today.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Seeing that there are no further members wishing to ask questions for this panel, I do want to thank our witnesses for being here today. It's been a very good and lively discussion. And I look forward to further discussions on this in the future. So pursuant to committee rules, I'll remind members they have 10 business days to submit additional questions for the record. And I ask the witnesses to submit their response to those questions within 10 business days upon receipt of the questions. Without objection, then, the subcommittee is adjourned.
Thank you.